Hello, everyone. This is Rick Bantelman with MyWorkDrive. Very excited to do this presentation today, which is it's a collaboration between MyWorkDrive and Morro Data. Each of us bring very specific things to the market, but together we bring things as one solution that neither of us actually had together. So it's kind of a mouthful to say, but you'll see as we break the products apart and then tie it all together on how they work. So a couple ground rules is there's a question and answer pod on the bottom. At any time, feel free to type in your question. At the end, we will answer the questions in the order that they were received, and we should have plenty of time at the end to do that so we stay within the hour. So let's get started.
All right, thank you, Rick. I'd like to thank everyone for attending the webinar. Let me first give you an overview of the Morro Data Global File Services solution. Morro Global File Services is a cloud-centric solution that combines the benefits of cloud's reliability and scalability and the local cache's performance and low latency data access. Your files are safe in the cloud with versioning to protect against ransomware. And we also support multi-cloud redundancy. The core function of Global File Services is file sync and file lock in real time across multiple sites. So 90% of our users take advantage of this function so their distributed team can collaborate as if they were at the same location using one file server. And the other 10% use us for their cloud backup because they like the NAS interface for their cloud data. So whether it's primary data, secondary data, or archive data, they can be managed in a single namespace and in one management interface. Customers use our automated migration tool to easily migrate hundreds of terabytes of data to the cloud. And I will talk about this a little bit more later. Finally, the Morro core team was responsible for the creation of the #1 SMB NAS before we started Morro. So we focus on making a comprehensive solution easy to use for the IT managers. And indeed, the #1 feedback from our customer is ease of use and ease of deployment. And today, Morro Data is used by customers large and small across many industries, including graphics, video, media design teams, manufacturing, many architecture, engineering, and construction firms, and other businesses with multiple sites that need to collaborate. Next slide, please. So a simple diagram is worth 1,000 words. So here we show multiple sites and the cloud-centric global file system. Maybe let me stop talking for 10 seconds so you can see the concept is actually pretty simple. Okay, so the cache drive at each site is a gateway with a local cache. Cache drive can be either a virtual machine or a physical appliance. So to a group of local users, cache drive works exactly like a NAS. It talks to the local PCs in SMB. The local user would think the files are stored locally, but the master data is actually in the cloud, and the local data in the cache is just a cached copy. And the global file systems combines all the cache drives at different sites, along with the cloud storage, combined into a cloud-centric file server. And we call that a cloud NAS. Now for distributed users at different sites, the files are synced in real time and file logs, for Office apps, PDF files, AutoCAD, Revit, etc. are also synced in real time. So the remote users can do remote team collaboration. And these days we have a hybrid workplace. So some of the customers deploy cache drives actually in their home offices for their power users. The cache inside the cache drive stores the most recently used files, and they are accessed at gigabit speed with very small latency. And we also support prefetch, so the most updated files are always present. The content, I should say, the content of the most updated files, most recently updated files are always present. Next slide, please. We also support cache drive deployment in any type of environment, including AWS and Azure, as shown on the upper right corner. Here, a cache drive VM can provide the file server function for Windows virtual desktops or AWS workspaces virtual PCs. The data is synced between the cloud and other on-prem sites. And because of the cache drive caching and the fact that we use object storage, the cache drive in cloud is actually much more economic compared with AWS or Azure's cloud file server solution that rely on premium storage and don't use caching. And for some of our customers who are still 100% on-prem, they would, however, set up the cloud workstations in this way for the reason of business continuity in the event that they lose access to the physical office, such as fire or other situations. Next slide, please. In this slide, we show the various form factors of the cache drives, which makes the Morro solution easy to deploy anywhere internet is available. Either as a virtual machine or as a physical appliance, the functions are the same. The only difference is the cache size, network speed, and the recommended number of users. On the left-hand side, the G80 Pro are used in offices, while the G80 are mostly used in smaller offices or home offices. And the SSD cache range from 1 to 8 terabyte in the G80s. The T600 and R11 can go up to 30 terabyte in SSD cache, and they are for offices that need larger cache sizes or 10 gig network speed. G80s and G80 Pros are very popular with our customers. They are just very easy to deploy, and the SSD cache means performance and reliability. We also support virtual machines for VMware, for Hyper-V, as well as for AWS and Azure. And for the virtual machines, the cache can be expanded. So this picture just shows the different form factors and deployment methods for the cache drives. Next slide. Morro Migrate is our data migration tool. It automates the migration of data from a traditional file server or NAS or a cloud bucket, as you can see on the left-hand side of the diagram, to the Morro global file system. So a cache drive is used to pull the source data and upload it to the cloud. At the same time, handling encryption, compression, and deduplication. During the migrate process, users can continue to access files from the cache drive, whether the files are already in the cloud or still in the source server. We also support incremental migrate, where the source server can continue to change throughout a longer migration time period. After the migration is done, then the master data is in the cloud and ready to be shared globally. So this concludes my overview of the Morro Data Cloud NAS solution. Now I pass the time back to Rick.
Thanks, Paul. That was great. One thing I should have said at the outset is how excited I am about what you just saw. Typically with MyWorkDrive, our claim to fame has been your everyday office type files, collaboration, things like that. And we've had many, many questions about, well, what about my big CAD files? What about my Creative Suite files? Things like that, very large files. And one of my always coined expressions was, well, we can't fix the speed of the internet, but with the collaboration between MyWorkDrive and Morro Data, we kind of have. So you can have the best of both worlds. And we'll get into that in a bit. So about MyWorkDrive, what I'm going to do is just a real quick overview for those people that never heard of us or learned for the first time seeing it. We also have people that are current customers interested in the Morro Data integration. So we're going to, kind of hit everything for everybody, but quickly. So we are secure file remote access from any OS, any operating system on any platform without vendor lock-in. Typical customers we have construction, we have engineering, very heavy into colleges, universities. We work with resellers. We have government agencies. We have very large government agencies, United Way, Boston Celtics, just a smattering of customers all over the place. And we've made our entree into healthcare as well. And one of the reasons is we're compliant with just about everything. And customers include enterprises, governments, higher education, and healthcare. Next slide, please. MyWorkDrive network overview. Keep in mind, I'm a sales guy, but I think I do a pretty good job with this. How does MyWorkDrive work? Well, you drop a MyWorkDrive server into your environment. The environment could be on-prem. It could be in Azure, AWS. It could be a hybrid situation where your data lives, which is over here. So once you add a MyWorkDrive server to your environment through CIFS and LDAP, SMB, actually, as well, existing data, Windows shares, this is what you already have set up today. All you do when you drop in a MyWorkDrive server, you say, of all of this that exists, what do we want to expose through MyWorkDrive? That makes it so there's no administration over on here as far as users, groups, permissions. You already have that today. You just tell MyWorkDrive what you want to leverage. What's on the server? Configuration files. No users, no groups, no anything like that. Again, that's over here. Keeps everything very, very secure. How do people access it? Well, we have three methods, right? We have desktop, mobile, browser, HTTPS. So a request comes in through HTTPS. MyWorkDrive says, okay, I see what you want to do. And we expose the file. That's how it all works. And this can be depending, and we have customers that are from 50 users all the way up to many, many thousand users. So the configuration of your machine could be as small as 4 gigabytes of RAM, 2 core, or more robust for the number that you need. Next slide, please. Secure file remote access. I blew ahead on this, talked about this. Web browser, map drive, mobile. So how are you going to access that? Through the web browser, through the URL of the MyWorkDrive server. Same URL through the map drive, and that requires a client for both Mac and OS, Mac and Windows, I should say. So we serve both operating systems, and we have a mobile client as well. Again, that gets accessed through the URL of the MyWorkDrive server, and leverages all of your underlying NTFS permissions and your current credentials. Next slide, please. Office 365. We are very, I would say that's really our claim to fame on how we work with people's everyday files, as I said earlier. So you can collaborate on Office 365 files seamlessly with no migration required to leverage online editing. Remember, we're just looking at your file servers where it exists today. Co-editing of Office documents in Office Online. Very cool feature that people can do. And then edit documents online directly from the browser, from the map drive, or mobile client. That's very neat. And underlying what that really means is I could actually have a mapped drive client on my PC, and I could edit in Office 365 if I tell the client that's how we want to do it, and not invoke or have to have a local office on that particular machine. Next slide, please. Security features. These would be everything hopefully you would expect and more. Duo, ADFS, SAML, two-factor authentication, file type blocking, and alerting. So we have an allow list and a block list that says, okay, maybe perhaps you want to block PSTs, EXEs, and that means from the user perspective, they can't put those into shares. We can also, we have an allow list. Maybe you just want Office type files, PST, and PDFs, maybe JPEGs, and alerting. Alerting is very cool in that you can be notified. Let's just, for an example, say 100 files being modified in 10 minutes. You can set those parameters. You may want to be notified of that. We do that for several different events we trap and can notify. We have pre-auth for identity providers wanting conditional access. Data leak prevention with encrypted view and watermarks, very nice. Maybe you have data that, yes, you want to expose remotely, but you don't want people to be able to print it, save it locally, email it out. So what we do is we'll present it through our viewer, we'll encrypt it, we will watermark it, and we'll make it, yeah, you can see it, but you can't do anything else with it. And it's not an overwrite, it's just added security on top of that. And then we have mapped drive access with device approval. I get very, very excited when we added that. That means an organization who can approve a device. We've entered the remote world where people are now working from home, and it's okay for them on their home machine to get at those network shares and work with them. But you can turn on device approval, and the administrator would have to say, yes, I will approve your use of that home machine to do that. And as you can imagine, that's very good to limit what machines can access. External guest user folder sharing and collaboration. We're heavily reliant on Active Directory underlying NTFS permissions, meaning the people normally were in the domain as a user. With guest user, we leverage Microsoft's B2B functionality, where you can actually invite people with an email address to a share that's been set up, and it still has all of the permissions required. I talked about briefly compliance, HIPAA for healthcare, FedRAMP for federal government, FIPS, PCI compliance. We could also add GDPR there as well. And it's really because of this data leak prevention that we pass all of these regulations, and also the fact that the data never leaves where it lives unless you want it to. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Rick. I'll take it from here, and then I'll be passing it over to Scott, who's going to be doing a demo for us. So what all does this mean? Rick sort of talked about this earlier, why the collaboration between Morro Data and MyWorkDrive. Well, as Rick sort of alluded to, even though we provide access to, as an alternative to VPN and be able to add that layers of security that you can't do on the MapDrive client and device approval, we still have those really large files that customers might want to work with. So you may have a situation where you have 1,000 employees and you've got 100 of which are engineers or designers that need to be able to work on really large files or remote offices. We've looked at a lot of different things in the marketplace. Usually the crux of the issue is that nobody really does the file locking properly. And with Morro Data, what we found is that they're actually able to sync those locks. They interact perfectly with MyWorkDrive. If somebody opens a file in San Francisco and then tries to open that same file in New York, they're going to get a file lock. So we're talking about true syncing, including the locks. We're not just talking about something like DFSR that's just doing replication. So by combining the two products, we're able to solve both of those issues. So some of the benefits that come with by doing the combination, from a training standpoint, customers are able to still deploy and use the same map drives. If they're using the MyWorkDrive MapDrive client, we even allow them to push out drive letters that match exactly with multiple drive letters. No other company doing remote access software like MyWorkDrive actually allows you to have different drive letters. They just dump you all into one drive. And of course, with Morro Data, you can use standard SMB drive mapping login scripts just like you always have. So there's really no training involved from a user standpoint. The migration, because we're maintaining NTFS permissions and ACLs, it's not like a cloud storage provider when you're moving stuff over to Morro Data. You're able to keep it in that NTFS format. You're not locking yourself into any particular vendor, but you're adding this solution on top of that, and you're even able to store it in your own Azure AWS account as well. Or you can use the Morro data storage for the global cloud storage. So it really gives you the flexibility, which is something that we've always thought from the beginning with MyWorkDrive, is what we were seeing is a lot of our customers getting locked into a specific vendor, and we want to stay agnostic from the storage standpoint and not force customers to put things in like Hotel California style of you can check in, but you can never check it back out. And when we're using the combined solution, we're looking at unlimited storage capacity, the global file locking that I talked about earlier, still maintaining the data privacy, and you control where those files live, and you're able to decide where you're going to be able to store those, and still having the capabilities of doing gigabit speed while having that hybrid cloud environment. So here's what it would look like in terms of the combined solution. So what we have is the Morro global file system that Paul talked about earlier. That's sort of the core. You can see it supports various vendors for that storage. You've got an office over here in London. You have one of the Morro data appliances over there. That's servicing that office. You've got an office over here in San Francisco, that's servicing that office. You've also got up in the cloud a MyWorkDrive server connecting to one of the storage appliance cache drives as well. And now that is made available through a URL over the internet, can also be put behind Cloudflare, other different, we actually have Cloudflare integration built in, so you don't even have to have any inbound ports to your MyWorkDrive server. And now a home user can connect using a URL through either the browser, the mobile, or the MapDrive client, and you're able to access those files. And then you've got the remote user, who is the power user who needs to be able to do design type files. One of those smaller cache drives could be shipped out to them and connected in to the network and be able to do the caching and be able to access those files locally alongside everybody else. So pretty much we've covered every base here. When we get into the different scenarios, as we talked about a little bit earlier, we've got the office in London, we've got the office in San Francisco. In this case, local user connected to the network, they're able to work on files side by side with the office in London. From the local standpoint, they're getting the full speed that they would expect, but still get to have that collaboration across the internet all the way around the world. And then we've got the remote users using the cache drive or the MyWorkDrive server. So here is what we're going to go through in the demo. Scott is going to bring up an environment where we've got the remote site as well as on both sides. We're also going to look at how it works for a remote user connecting through the MyWorkDrive server, files being stored on the cache drive in one location, being shown on the other location. And at this point, I'm going to stop sharing.
And I will start. So yeah, as Dan and Paul and Rick have all talked about, complete solution, assuming my screen share is working for you. I wanted to start by logging into the Morro data management interface, just show you what we've configured. We've basically got San Francisco and London. So Yeah, we're logging in as admin here.
MyWorkDrive.com.
You sure? Whoops. Too many accounts. Keep track of all these things. You'll notice here, oh, we've got an update that will apply in our next maintenance period. But for those of you who are more data customers, this of course is familiar. For the MyWorkDrive side of the house, quick dashboard showing you what you've got configured, what activity is going on in your environment. For our test case today, we've got 2 shares configured in our global file system, share 1 and share 2. Obviously, you can have as many as you want, and you get to name these however you want. So, you know, it's all very simple to configure, easy to set up. We have actually 3 cache appliances in our environment. 2 are currently in production. One up in Azure, which we're going to use to simulate our London office, and our QA2, which is in San Francisco. These of course show you if they're pending updates or anything of that nature. You can click into these. There's a little bit of configuration. I think you'll see that we're using SMB, traditional SMB. You get scheduling if you want to adjust bandwidth around time of day, if you're putting this into a an environment where you're charged for bandwidth. And we've got prefetch enabled, which Paul talked a little bit about, just making sure that our data is current in all the locations. Of course, if you've got archive data or shares that don't need that functionality, you don't need to enable it. And we're configured using, as Dan's talked about and Paul both, we're using traditional Active Directory. So our cache appliances are joined to our domain. This is all obviously configurable, and there are a number of different modes. So you have the ultimate in flexibility as far as configuring. When we look at our MyWorkDrive server now, as one of the 2 circles showed, or as the global diagram showed, we've got a MyWorkDrive server attached to our San Francisco environment. So I'll go ahead and log into that. We've also got an update available for that. So we'll need to do that in our maintenance period as well. What you'll see is we've got those 2 shares that I mentioned, share 1 and share 2. They're attached to my cache appliance in San Francisco. If we take a look at this second share, you'll notice that I've enabled DLP mode. So that's one of those pieces of security that Rick mentioned being available for the MyWorkDrive users, who are those remote users and home users who are connecting by the server URL. In, of course, just all the typical settings. I know our MyWorkDrive customers are super familiar with this, but I just wanted to point out that we've got some file blocking going on. So you'll see when I log into the MyWorkDrive client that we get a warning about our file blocking, in addition to the DLP that you saw in shares a minute ago. We've also added on top of our login an SSO. So we're actually logging into the MyWorkDrive tools with Azure AD. Of course, we support multiple SSOs, and really with manual, you can go for any SSO that you want that uses SAML. And we've also got, I think Rick mentioned alerts. We've got alerts configured. So we're sending an email out whenever we hit thresholds based on these activities. And we've got device management. This is one of our newer products, so that the only users who can actually log in to mobile and MapDrive clients are these users logging in that we pre-approved. And I'll show you that when we get to the last step, which is logging in through the MapDrive client. But let's go ahead and start with that first circle that Dan rather showed with our 2 environments. Traditional in-office users, or our London example here on the right, could be a user at home with one of those G80 or G80 Pro that Paul mentioned, cache appliances at home, but it's essentially 2 different locations working purely off SMB with the Morro Data cache drives. So on our London office, we're on Azure 2. And of course, these could be map drives, as Dan mentioned. I don't happen to have them mapped. I'm just browsing to them, but they of course could be map drives, MN, etc. And I do map them when we go to the MyWorkDrive MapDrive client. I'll show you how we push out the drive letter there. But if I browse into share, You can see I've got the same set of files here, 32 items on both sides. If I were to open something up, just go ahead and open this, you'll see that that's basically immediate. The time that we spent waiting was really for Word to load on my workstation and not for the file to transfer from the cloud. And we can make edits to this file. Go ahead and save that. You'll see when I load this over here in London, again, the time we spent was really waiting for the file to, or for Word to open, not even the file to transfer. And of course, our file's locked because my user in San Francisco has this open. So you see what Dan talks about, what Paul talked about with that file locking just works. It just happened. It's immediate. Of course, I can take the notification option. I can wait for this, or I can open it, read only. All the standard functions of Word exist in this environment. And it's not just files that are there already. If I was to copy a file in, let's go backwards here. In this case, we'll bring this file over from London. And what you'll see is file copies in. I go reload over here. Timestamp on that is well, there are files already here. Oh, I thought it was there. Where did I? That was a terrible. There it is. It's right there. Dates don't line up because it's time of the day. So that's on me. Of course, I can open this file up. Again, you saw it's taking longer for Excel to open than it is for us to move over that 22 meg file. That file's just there. Users can work with it. Of course, the same goes with an even larger file. If I want to move this PDF in from San Francisco, why, that's a 200 megabyte file there. If I drag it over, and if we take a look, we'll actually sort by size this time so I don't embarrass myself. And that file's already here available for the user in London, and London can open that up. So you can see this is immediate, it's prompt, it's seamless. The user experience, as Dan mentioned, there's no training. Users don't need to understand that their files have moved to the global file system in the cloud. It all just works for them. So if we look at, okay, we've got users, we've got either this home user potentially somewhere, or we've got an office in London, or a temporary site at a contract on a contract project, like wherever it is, you can connect these environments together. But then let's say my San Francisco user wants to go home. They happen to be working today from home. It's just not a day in the office. So now I've got the option. I want to bring in MyWorkDrive. I want to use that, as Dan showed on the diagram, the MyWorkDrive server connected into San Francisco, or connected into London, or connected into a virtual appliance up in the cloud. So let's just log into, get this browser on the right screen here. Let's just log into our MyWorkDrive server. Of course, this is an address that you would share with your team members. They would bookmark it, send it out in an email, anything they need to do. As I mentioned a minute ago, we're going to be logging in with Azure AD. So we're immediately passed over to Azure. And of course, this is an SSO. So if I happen to have already been signed into this browser, I'd logged into my email or Office 365 or another SSO product, I wouldn't even have been prompted to log in. Now, as I logged in, I've immediately got a notice that downloads are disabled on that Morro 2 share. Remember when I showed you the Morro 2 share in our share config in MyWorkDrive, I mentioned I've enabled DLP on that share. So this share has those DLP restrictions, the watermarking, the inability to download that Rick mentioned. In fact, let's just look at that real quick. So I go into my Morro 2 share. I have what looks like traditional access to all of my files, but when I go to access them, instead of it opening to edit or allowing me to download, it gives me a watermark. Of course, you control what the watermark says. Ours just says confidential. This might have your company name. It might have some other warning and the date and time. So if I screen grab this or take a picture of this with my phone, I know exactly who accessed this file. But the regular share, just the traditional Morro share, has no restrictions on it. And here's that same set of 32, now 34, because I copied a couple more files in. Here's that same set of files. If I open up that balance copy file that we saw me working on a minute ago, why there's the 6789 that my user in San Francisco added to the list. And we'll go ahead and go into edit mode. This will take us over to Office 365. Of course, I already signed in via SSO, so enabling that functionality saves me from having to log in again to Office. And there's my file, 678, 10, 11, 12. And now, again, the fact that these locks and this syncing is happening all the way through the environment. Here's that same file. You can actually see it's showing a current edit. We go ahead and double click that, and the file is locked because the MyWorkDrive user happens to have it in use. And again, same functionality with, I can take a read-only copy. I could take a notification, and as soon as the MyWorkDrive user here exited out of Office Online, it would free up and let the user in London edit. So same seamless functionality for the users. But okay, web client, you know, it took an extra step. I had to sign into the web. Why don't we take a look at that MapDrive client? Let me sign out of these things here. And again, I had mentioned that my user in San Francisco was working from home today or working from a client site, just simply not in the office, right? And again, I haven't signed into any VPN. There's no complexity. I'm simply going to run the installed MyWorkDrive client. If these are owned machines or enrolled in device management or, you know, in the office and subject to group policy or domain join, you could have pushed this client out, could automatically be installed. The user might not even need to know to install it. You could even have map at startup enabled. So if these were, you know, permanently remote based users, they would never even need to see the client run. Of course, it already knows I'm going to log in with SSO. I have not logged in on this machine yet, so it's going to prompt me, and we'll just go ahead and do that real quick. And I was remiss in not pointing out when I showed you the configuration of MyWorkDrive that we were going to map drive letters, but we will. Again, here's that warning Rick mentioned that I showed you we had enabled. We blocked certain file types. So this user will not be able to interact with these sort of unusual file types. Of course, we're not limiting documents or PDFs or anything of that nature. And what we've got here is we've got the restricted view, because remember, one of our shares is got data leak prevention enabled on it. The share 2 or the N, what I've mapped is the N drive, and I've mapped an M drive for our primary share. So why don't we start with that restricted share? And you'll see, if I could double click without scrolling, this is warned that we're restricted. But if we click into that, we still get and see all of our traditional files. But when we interact with them, instead of opening Word on my desktop, it's taking me out to open it in Office Online. It's going to give me that same view we had a moment ago with, oh, it wants me to log in, but you know, you get the idea. It's going to give me that same view of the limitations that we would have there as far as watermarking and such. And then of course we have our regular M drive, which again, that same set of files, you'll see it's updated right now. We pop that open. Now we're opening in local Office, except I probably still have a file lock on one of these other environments that I didn't clear yet. But again, the file locking works. It's telling you this file's locked. So we can pop open these demo instructions instead, and you'll see we'll do essentially the exact same thing. I'll just 1112 here. We'll save that. You'll note that my changes are immediately saved back, right? It's all saved back already. And if I come over here and pop this file open, what you'll see, since the MyWorkDrive user has this file open now via the MapDrive client, but that still translates over to our London user on the other cache appliance, and that file is locked for them. So exact same functionality across MapDrive, mobile, in Office, out of Office, you know, SMB, all of that, all of those same experiences, they all just work exactly the same way. Dan, Paul, Rick, anything else you think we should show them before I pass it back for our wrap up and Q&A?
Looks great. Thanks.
That was a great demo.
Awesome. All right. Well, I will pass it back now. Rick and Dan are going to wrap us up here, and we'll do some Q&A. I think I saw a few questions ready for us.
Okay, looks like we do have a few questions. We will definitely, there's one here around desktop local cache software and learning more about that with Azure. We'll definitely follow up on that. I know that there is some support for Azure. Is that right, Paul?
Yeah, we support Azure, cache drive VM in Azure. I'm not sure this is what the user meant to ask.
Yeah, it's a little bit, it's a little bit of a vague question. It could be, can we put the cache drive VM in Azure? Of course. Can we use Azure Files as our file source for the cache drive? Can we use, as you actually already covered, I think this question came in really early, so we might have answered some of these questions as you went through the conversation, but can you use this as the Azure in the workspace like Azure and AWS? So really yes to all those questions. Just depends on which component we need to focus on.
Okay, let me try to see if I understand the question. So our cache drive does not work with Azure Files as a file source. So the files need to be imported to the Morro global file system. So once imported into the global file system, yes, then the cache drive will serve as a file server in Azure to serve all the virtual desktops.
Right, and it's basically their own S3 bucket at that point, or they can use the global storage provided by Morro Data, right?
So the master data is stored in your S3 bucket or in your Azure bucket, and then but it's cached in the cache drive appliance in Azure. And the cache could be anywhere from 64 gigabyte to 256 gigabyte. So it's fairly small, although maybe you have 10 terabyte of data. So all you need is to have 10 terabyte of object storage, and then just about 256 gigabyte of cache in your cache drive appliance.
Okay, and I think that feeds into the next question is you guys support Wasabi too. I think we saw that on one of the slides.
Yes, we do.
Cool. So that's another option. If folks want to be able to use that as their S3 bucket, they can do that. We do have a question in here about, does MyWorkDrive work well with Jump Cloud versus normal AD? We'd have to get back to you on that one. I believe Jump Cloud uses LDAP as opposed to domain join. So that'd be something we'll have to get back to you on that. It wouldn't be difficult for us to do that. So we can definitely get back to you on that question.
From the Morro side, we do work with Jump Cloud or Open LDAP. So quite some of our users actually use that mode.
Here's one. If files are stored in Azure, do you have a VM to interface with the storage system in Azure and use MyWorkDrive to map the drives for the users? So I think we more or less covered that. I guess the use case here is my users are AutoCAD and Revit. So yeah, basically what we just showed, I think was in the demo. You can use MyWorkDrive for those users that are not your AutoCAD and Revit type users, and then you can use a cache appliance. Even they're basically the size of a hockey puck, as you saw in the picture. It can be shipped out to individuals' homes. So if they're a designer and you need them to be able to do that kind of work, and that would be this case for those.
Yeah, that question is really what brings MyWorkDrive, what brings us to want the tool set of Morro Data, because it really solves that very specific problem of, when you've got design files that are large or use a lot of reference files, and those applications, AutoCAD, Photoshop, Premiere, they require extremely low latency connections to those files. So if you're trying to use the MyWorkDrive scenario where you've got an internet connection and an on-pole multi-hop, conversion, decompile sort of environment, those files don't work well for that. But when you introduce the Morro Data global file system and the cache drives, where the cache drives are actively, and you saw when I checked on the box for prefetch in our demonstration, they're actively bringing those files local to those cache appliances. So when the designer, the developer, the engineer, the artist goes to access that file, all of the reference files that they need that would be in associated folders right there in the same share are all already there, and there's just zero latency. So whether you're editing in Premiere or Illustrator or Photoshop or Revit, there's no wait, and it just works immediately.
Okay, and the next question is about licensing. We definitely would be happy to talk to you about that. We have
I can jump on that one, Dan. I'm the sales guy, right?
Yeah, we
so
have sales at Morro Data for the Morro side of things, sales at MyWorkDrive. Either way, if you want to do the combined solution, we'll work with you to put together a custom quote to be able to package it up.
Exactly. Couple of discovery questions first, then we can tie it up the way you need, right?
We do have a question about what happens if connectivity is lost. What is the behavior? I can respond to the MyWorkDrive side on that. From a MyWorkDrive perspective, the user will get prompted that, connectivity needs to be restored for the map drive automatically. The same thing with the web browser. The nice thing about the MyWorkDrive side of things, you're not actually downloading any files. So if you were in the middle of an edit on a browser, there's nothing that is lost. If you're in the middle of an edit on the map drive client, you can reconnect the map drive client and then sync it and move it back up there at that time as well. I'm not sure if you want to respond to the other one, Paul.
Yeah, I will. So because the cache drive appliance works as a NAS, so you shouldn't see the difference between the NAS and the cache drive, other than the fact that we upload the data to the cloud. So when the internet is cut off, you still have access to whatever files that's already present in the cache drive. If the file is only a stub file, then you may not be able to access that during the internet downtime. But as long as the files are there, you can continue to use it as a NAS. And then when the connection is restored, then all those upload and download will happen.
Okay. And
I actually showed that during the live presentation, where our DR cache appliance actually is offline, and it had a number of pending updates that the software was waiting to push to it. So
yeah, just queues them up, take care of it later. We have a question around, would either of these solutions help with ransomware? Definitely, I know on the MyWorkDrive side, that's a lot of what we've been doing over the last year or two, is adding pieces to our software so that you're going to prevent that ransomware from getting in the first place, either by having devices that you approve, conditional access in front, alerts on anything that modifies a certain number of files in a certain amount of time frame, extension blocking, all that whole laundry list of things, two-factor authentication, either via SAML or a Duo as well, all being added. For that is one of our primary reasons for being able to put all that into the product, to be able to lock down the environment and prevent things from laterally getting on the network as well. Even if a machine were to get attacked that had a map drive client on it and you were getting some alerts, it's not like a machine that's connected to your LAN on VPN, where you would typically have, where it now has lateral access. That machine is only able to get to the MyWorkDrive server over HCP and can't get any further.
And on the Morro Data side, because we support versioning, so you can recover back to yesterday's version for the share, for the folder, or for the file, or last week. So all the versions are capped. So it's a protection against ransomware.
Okay. Yeah, the last question, if I can interpret it right, basically would be sort of like, what happens if you lose the internet and somebody's working on the cache copy? and now maybe somebody else is trying to work. I assume that maybe while they were working on the file, now the timeout may be expired and the MyWorkDrive server still has connection to the file share because it's on another cache appliance up in Azure. I've got a user that's using that file up there through MyWorkDrive or through another cache appliance. What happens when that other file now gets back online and that user had been working on it? Will it overwrite that first user's file, or will it notice there's a new lock out there?
So this has become a kind of a philosophical debate among our users. Some user wants to continue the productivity as much as possible, and while the other users are more concerned about the file consistency across, globally. So we haven't done this yet, but we'll provide an option for the user to lock down the share to read only if we detect the connection is lost. So that, so that's the consistency first approach, and versus the normal productivity, let you continue to work as much as you can and then try to sort out any inconsistency later on.
Yeah, then you get into this situation, last writer wins kind of scenario, or creating duplicate files for those where there's a conflict and all of that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because versions are supported, so all those kind of mitigated the inconsistency.
Oh, I see. So
Yeah,
if you did have that, you could just sort out the one that you want.
Yeah, the work isn't lost. Someone could manually go in, look at the two different versions, pick the pieces they want, and create that final perfect document. On the MyWorkDrive side, which we kind of skipped, if you're a remote user on MyWorkDrive and you lose your internet connection, we hold that file lock open for you so there wouldn't be a second user. And you've got up to 15 minutes to restore your internet connection. So if you were working on your laptop, traveling into the city and you ended up in a tunnel, or, you just had a momentary internet outage at home, the router took a firmware update or something. As soon as you reconnected and reestablished your MyWorkDrive connection, or as soon as the internet came back, MyWorkDrive would reconnect. Or if you were on a web client, you would reconnect. And that file you have open, you would still own that file lock. So no one else would have interjected. Now, because kind of like what Paul talked about in continuing productivity, if you remain offline, I believe it's 15 minutes, but Dan, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But if you remain offline, MyWorkDrive will eventually remove your file lock so other users can use that file. So it's not locked permanently. It's not like a user has permanently held that file open, but we do want to give you some room to reestablish an internet connection if you have a temporary internet outage.
Yeah, and we also have, of course, the thing on the admin panel where the administrator, if they needed to get that lock removed earlier, they can go into the admin panel and kill the old lock on the file immediately.
Yeah. Yes, if 7 of you were collaborating on a presentation that was due in 10 minutes and one of you lost internet connection.
Like our PowerPoint slide deck.
Like our PowerPoint slide deck, we could just kick you out. And, I don't know what happened to Rick. He's missing, but we're not going to wait for him. We've got 9 more minutes to finish this deck. And so, yeah, so there's emergency tools in there as well. But ideally, it's designed to be just self-managing, and it, Rick is out for 2 or 3 minutes and then he comes back and it's not a 10-minute deadline and nobody even notices.
Awesome. So that's the extent of our questions. I think a really great demo. Thank you for your help, Rick and Paul and Scott and Jake. Great.
Oh, we actually got a follow-up question on that internet, but I think it's, if the internet connection fails to a backup and different ISP, et cetera, your computer is reestablishing your connection, at least on the, well, really either side, right? The Morro Data product is agnostic to what its internet connection is. It's just going to reconnect to the global file cache. We've done that repeatedly in our own lab, just testing and moving things around. MyWorkDrive server, you're going to reestablish your connection. So it's really seamless as far as an alternate connection to ISP, et cetera. Anyway, sorry, Dan, I'll let you wrap up.
Yeah, so great. So we will share the slide deck with anybody that's was an attendee today. And as Rick mentioned, we'll also be sending out a link to the video as well. And thank you very much for your time today.
Yes, thank everyone. Sales@mywordrive.com, sales@morrodata.com. If you have technical questions that you forgot to ask, or sales, just go to either one of us. You can go we'll take questions from either, and we'll get back to you very quickly. Thanks so much again for attending. Really great questions, and I think we're ending just on time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.